The American dream represents the set of ideals held by many Americans lauding and prioritizing financial security, home ownership, and racial equality. The definition of the American dream has not changed significantly between generations, although recent doubts about its veracity have become apparent. One's ability to achieve the American dream can be hindered by race and geographic location. Traditionally, the concept of the American dream has centered around home ownership. The young, happy couple thriving in a comfortable suburban home has been portrayed in media for decades, cementing it as a cornerstone of the dream. However, recent data show a focus on long-term financial stability supersedes purchasing a house for many Americans. Although this sentiment is likely influenced by the recent housing bubble of 2008, it also demonstrates a more deep-seated split between media's familial, consumeristic ideal of owning a home and the more socially common, individualistic, survival-oriented goal of being financially independent in old age. From the perspective of the disadvantaged, the American dream often takes on an entirely different set of ideals. Martin Luther King Jr. perfectly encapsulated this version of the dream when he declared, "The American dream is a dream of equality of opportunity, of privilege and property widely distributed, a dream of a land where men will not argue that the color of a man's skin determines the content of his character." This sentiment veers from a focus on individual security and toward collective freedom. MLK observed the racial disparities of his day and concluded that the highest priority of Americans should be to eradicate them rather than vie for personal success. Whether the American dream represents financial stability or racial equality, younger Americans hold the ideal in higher importance than older Americans. This supposedly represents a generational gap between cohorts. However, the differences are much better explained with current age than with generation, as it makes sense for youths to strive for financial success more than the elderly, who have reached their later years and lack the scale of opportunity for success and growth that 25-year-olds possess. The definition of the American dream hasn't undergone significant transformation, and although its ideals clearly have been modified over the years, it remains intact as a fundamental ethos for each generation, motivating Americans to strive toward financial independence and stability. Today, many Americans' belief in the continued viability of the American dream is faltering. To subscribers of this school of thought, successes and failures often appear random and unprovoked, with the efforts of any one person seemingly powerless to regain control of the volatility of life. Pop group MKTO summarizes this view by remarking that sometimes the underdogs rise and the mighty fall. The randomness of it all leads them to ponder whatever happened to the American dream. The American dream is unequally achievable depending on an individual's skin color. Centuries of prejudice and discrimination against African Americans have shown themselves in institutions like slavery, Jim Crow legislation, mass incarceration, and implicit and institutional racial bias. Current inequalities like the relatively poor quality of public education available for Black students hinder the efforts of the average American of color while imposing few such limitations on white Americans. This racial inequality extends into recent data that suggests life success is highly divided along racial lines. A particular benchmark favors whites over blacks in every stage of life by significant margins, with relative stability for whites, but a decline of blacks meeting or exceeding the standards. Although many white people obviously don't achieve this level of success, the racial gap here is startling and suggests social imbalances in equality of opportunity for people of color in the U.S. Although it's difficult for the average person to succeed in the U.S., African Americans like Simone Manuel have still achieved the American dream. At the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Manuel became the first African American woman to win an Olympic gold medal in swimming. The accompanying fame, monetary awards, and advertising offers from this accomplishment surely qualify Manuel as having achieved the dream. even while facing any number of heretofore mentioned social obstacles. Being Black doesn't entirely prevent most individuals from achieving financial stability. Besides racial inequalities, the U.S. also contains geographic disparities in one's ability to climb the social ladder or achieve upward mobility in social status and financial health. An American living in the southeastern United States has, on average, an extremely low chance of rising from the lowest to the highest quintile in terms of income level. This type of social mobility is much more common for impoverished Midwesterners, attesting to grave geographic disparities in the probability of achieving the American dream. The American dream as a concept involves a plethora of standards of varying importance. For different people, racial inequity, financial success and stability, or home ownership ultimately defines the American dream. Generational gaps are minute, but many individuals have lost hope in their self-efficacy and, therefore, the ideals of the dream. Racial inequalities and geographic differences can hold people back, but, theoretically, anyone can still achieve the American dream.